What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome to Fresh Comic Stories. Guys, this is the channel that we basically sit down and cover different kinds of comic book stories. Now, guys, today we are going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and we are going to continue our coverage over the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Now, today, we're going to cover the Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four crossover storyline that took place in two books and two annuals. The first annual was called Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four. The second annual was called Ultimate Fantastic Four and Ultimate X-Men. They just basically flipped the names around for both books. Anyways, this was a two-part crossover event they did right before Ultimatum. And this storyline does nothing for Ultimatum, but we are going to cover this storyline just because it's kind of interesting in a way. So guys, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. Now, this story picks up 20 years in the future, where we pick up with the X-Men in the future. Now, we see some of the usual X-Men characters, Wolverine, Kitty Pryde, and Rogue. But we also see Captain America in a new outfit, where it shows that he is part of the X-Men now, which is weird. We also see another member that everyone calls him Phoenix, and we're going to learn who is this new character who is going by the name Phoenix down the road. But we see this X-Men team right now on this train, and they are trying to cause some kind of accident with this train before the Sentinels arrive. Meaning that in the future, Sentinels are back in the picture again, and the question is, what led to them coming back? Now we see that what they did is they moved all the innocent people to a different part of the train, and Wolverine cuts off the line of the front part of the train, which caused the train to fall off the tracks. This is where we jump to the present day, and we pick up with the Fantastic Four as we know them in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, where we see Susan and Reed getting ready for some kind of dinner, except the time machine that Reed built turned on by itself, which should not be happening. We then see the train from the future land in the middle of the Baxter building. This leads to the Fantastic Four meeting the X-Men from the future. This, of course, leads to the X-Men from the future fighting against the Fantastic Four, where we see that these X-Men are trying to kill the Fantastic Four. Well, really, just Reed. Now, the biggest moment of this section of the book is that we see Susan try to fight against this new Phoenix person. When she mentions that the Fantastic Four is a family, this guy flips out and states that she has no idea what family means and throws her away. He tells Susan that whatever happens in the future is Reed's fault. Now we learn that something big must have happened because the whole world has turned against mutants, and that is why Captain America joined the X-Men. But this fight gets wrapped up with the future X-Men taking Reed away. This is where we pick up with the X-Men, where we learn this story picks up right after the aftermath of our last Ultimate X-Men video, where we saw some of the X-Men addicted to the Banshee drug, but also the fact a lot of the X-Men were injured from that storyline. And so right now, only people who are going to be involved from the X-Men will be Jean Grey, Rogue, Wolverine, Iceman, and Liz Allen, who is Firestar in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And so we see the Fantastic Four come and tell the X-Men what happened at the Baxter building, because to the Fantastic Four, the X-Men should help out since their future selves kidnapped Reed Richards. And so you have the X-Men agree, and you have Jean Grey, who is the Phoenix in the present day, use her powers to locate the future X-Men and Reed, where they find out that they are still at the Baxter building. The Fantastic Four were tricked to believe the future X-Men ran away. And so this leads us back to the Baxter building, where we pick up with the future X-Men trying different ways to kill Reed Richards, except the way his body has evolved, Reed cannot die. Now, after Captain America and Wolverine leave the room, we see Reed tell us that this new person who is the Phoenix in the future is his son, because Reed has used his time machine to look at different timelines. And in every timeline, Reed has a son named Franklin, and they all look the same. And so he was able to recognize Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is the Phoenix in the future. Before we learn how he became the Phoenix though, we see some Wolverine claws stabbed through Franklin. This is where you have the other X-Men realize something is off, and they go back to check up on Franklin to find him on the ground bleeding out. This is where we see one Wolverine appear, and then we see an army of Wolverines appear, where we learn that in the future, whoever brought the Sentinels back, the new version of Sentinels was modeled after Wolverine, because he is the #1 assassin in the world basically. And so you have these Sentinel Wolverines attack the future X-Men. Now, the present day X-Men and the Fantastic Four arrive back at the Baxter building to only see that the future Rogue is dead, but also future Captain America is dying as well. This is where Jean Grey tells us that this future Captain America is not Steve Rogers. Instead, this is Scott Summers, because in the future, someone was able to take people powers away, and so Steve Rogers lost his super soldier powers, and of course he aged quickly and died. And when Scott lost his powers, he took up the mantle, and this is where we see future Kitty Pryde telling us that the new Sentinels were modeled after Wolverine, which we already know. But we see that Franklin Richards is okay as well. Now you have Franklin tell everyone that Reed was taken into the future because they are trying to save him. The reason why the future X-Men try to kill him is because Reed is the person who starts the horrible future. This is where we see Reed Richards trapped in a prison cell in the future, where you have Reed trying to figure out what is going on. And so he's able to break out of his cell, except this leads to Reed meeting the future Fantastic Four, where we learn Susan is still part of the team, Ben Grimm as well, except he is in some kind of armor, but Firestar from the X-Men replaced Johnny Storm, and Namor has joined the Fantastic Four as well, showing us that a lot of things have changed. This is where we pick back up in the present day, where we pick up with some of the Fantastic Four and some of the X-Men breaking into the helicarrier. The reason why is because they are trying to steal Pym particles. The reason why is because they're going to use the Pym particles to make Reed's time machine work and go into the future to save Reed. Where we jump forward to the Baxter building, where we see now that both the future X-Men working with the present day X-Men and the Fantastic Four, except this leads to a moment where you have the present day characters trick the future characters, telling them that they cannot be trusted since they came from the future and try to kill Reed. And so how can they be trusted with the mission to save Reed? Now this leads to a moment where you have Kitty Pryde tell Susan Storm that in the future, Susan is also at fault for what had happened in the future. Where we jump into the future and we see Reed is learning about the changes to the future Fantastic Four. The first thing he learns is that Johnny Storm is dead, which tells us why Firestar is here. Now when he sees Namor, Reed wants to kill Namor. And this is where you have Ben Grimm in the armor calm Reed down and then show Reed that in the future, Reed was able to turn Ben Grimm back to normal and no longer be the Thing. Now this is where you have Susan tell Reed that the reason why the X-Men from the future try to kill him is because Susan Storm did something and Reed had helped. Now we jump into the End Zone, another dimension that the Ultimate Marvel Universe discovered in the beginning of the Ultimate Fantastic Four run, where we see Franklin Storm, Jean Grey, Rogue, and Wolverine. And the reason why they are here is because in the future Susan Storm locked up mutants and other superheroes in a prison that was built in the end zone. Now, while they are planning on how they're going to get inside that prison, they are greeted by Nihil, and I know I just butchered his name. But this character died back in Ultimate Fantastic Four number 18. Except this is where we learn that this is not Nihil at all. That matter of fact, this is future Reed Richards, where we learn that he has been hiding in the end zone this whole time, where he tells us that this future was started by a combination of him and future Susan Storm, and the reason why she changed was because Johnny Storm died. This is where we pick up with the future Kitty Pryde, Liz Allen, Iceman, The Thing, and Johnny Storm, where they are breaking into the Baxter building here in the future to free Reed Richards, where of course is going to lead into them battling the future Fantastic Four. Now we see future Susan Storm talking to present day Reed, where she shows him a machine his future self made called the Promise, where this machine was used on Ben Grimm first and turned him back to normal, except after future Reed did that, he disappeared. This is where we jump forward a couple minutes later and we see Namor holding down a future Iceman, and the reason why is because future Iceman is going to be a test subject for present day Reed, where Reed was able to get a smaller version of the Promise machine and use it on future Iceman and turn him back to normal. Except this leads to the present day heroes attacking Namor and trying to get Reed back. Except you have future Susan Storm take present day Reed somewhere else. This is where the story jumps back over to the end zone, where you have Reed tell everyone that a big event called Ultimatum is going to test Susan, and if she lets that event break her, this future is going to happen. But also we learn that when future Reed used his machine to turn Ben back to normal, it also took his powers away, Cyclops and Steve Rogers as well. Now while they are talking, that is when they get ambushed by an army of Wolverine Sentinels, where of course you have the good guys fighting against these robots. Except in the middle of the battle, we learn that Franklin Richards is a traitor because he takes the Phoenix powers away from Jean Grey, and then reveal that this whole time he was a spy for the future Susan Storm. And that is when we see her and Namor holding present day Reed, but he is knocked out. Now while that is happening outside, you have Wolverine and Rogue sneak into the prison in the end zone, where they are trying to figure out how to break everyone out and also stop this madness. This is where you have them find future Wolverine. In the future, they captured him and had him plug into the system where they used to make their Wolverine Sentinel models. And so you have present day Wolverine kill off his future self, which shut down all of the Sentinels in the area. Then this leads to the story literally being wrapped up in about 2 pages, where after the robots were shut off, you have future Reed use his device on his own son and future Susan Storm, where they no longer have powers, and then the heroes free everybody from the prison in the end zone. After that, everyone goes their separate ways, and that is literally it. And the only thing we see is Reed Richards and Susan Storm spending time with one another, except when she walks out of the room, we see that Reed had bought an engagement ring, and we are going to see that ring again in Ultimatum. But this is where we are going to end today's video, and guys, next week we are finally going to cover Ultimatum, and honestly I am not excited at all because that storyline is it's bad. But anyways guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'm out of here and I will see you on the next comic book video. Later, guys.